Welcome to the Blade Lab, or if you've been here before, welcome back. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Golden Design Works caliber knife. This is a relatively small production done by a fellow named Blaze. I don't know if his last name is Golden, his website doesn't say, but this is his second design. It is, the OEM is Bestech. It is a, well, the design is interesting. You see the handles are titanium. You can see that the clip is also titanium. The blade is MagnaCut steel, which he has spec'd at 61 to 63 HRC, which is a good range. It has these tabs for front flipping and rear flipping, and obviously it has a blade hole for middle finger deployment. And it has a button, which we're going to talk about. So what is special about this knife? Why, of the trillions of titanium frame locks, did I choose to spend my own money on this one? Well, for me, it always comes down to a few things. There's aesthetics. Is it a particularly beautiful or cool looking knife? Is it different? There's materials. Are there unique materials? Like, is the steel some sort of exotic super steel? In this case, it's MagnaCut, so not particularly exotic, but still a great balanced steel. There's the action. Is it a knife that has sort of renowned for having a phenomenal action, like a Shirogorov or a Oz Roosevelt? We'll talk about that. Or is it the mechanism? Is there something unique and clever and new about the locking and opening mechanism? And that right there, the last one, would be the main reason why I opted to add this to my collection. You can see that it has a button, but it also has a lock bar. It looks like a traditional frame lock. So what's the deal with that? Well, it's astounding to me that nobody's ever thought of this before. But what Golden Design Works, for Blaze there, has figured out is a way to, let me just show you the blade finally. He's figured out a way to actuate a traditional frame lock with a button. So you get sort of the best of all worlds. You get this closing action that you can do without having your fingers in the blade path, as you would with a lock bar, which most of us can avoid cutting ourselves, but every now and then I think we all do a little bit. And what's cool, what's especially cool about this one is that you can use either method. You can close it with the button, obviously, or you can use the traditional lock bar method, and both work equally well. So that is super cool. How did he do it? Why didn't anyone figure that out? Well, that I don't know. But the way he did it was, if we look at it up close, so you see from the top it looks just like a regular plunge lock, like so many other button locks on the market. However, if you look at it from the bottom of the knife, if we'll focus, you can see that when you push the button, it just actuates the frame lock. And the way it does it is with it's connected to a sort of plate, I guess a sort of spring type plate that depresses the lock bar. After this sort of overview section, I'm going to do a disassembly, and you'll be able to see exactly how it looks. So yeah, that was probably the biggest thing that interested me about this knife, but not the only thing. The other thing about it is that it's just a beautiful design in my opinion. You can see how the curvature of the blade just blends perfectly with the curvature of the frame or the straight section of the frame. The lines are just super clean. Has very little exposed hardware. You see it has just this one T8 screw on the show side, and on the reverse side all you see is there's obviously a pivot T8 for the pivot, and I believe it's also a T8 for the lock bar insert. But that is all of the visible hardware. The clip has a hidden screw, which you can access from inside the knife. And disassembly, as again you'll see later, only requires removing 2 screws. So super easy takedown and for cleaning. Let's maybe talk about the specs generally. And so what you may have noticed, or there's no real reference so far, but this is a full-size knife. Let me give you the exact specs. The overall length is 8.5 inches. The blade length is about from here to the scale is about 3 3/4 inches, and the actual cutting edge is. It's funny, Golden Design lists it as 3 1/4 inches. I measured it at 3 3/8 inches, so not a big difference. But yeah, so full-size knife. The weight on the there are I should have mentioned earlier, but there are 2 different milling patterns available for the scales. I opted for this. I forget what he calls it. Anyway, the lines style. He has a name for it, and it'll come to me later. But anyway, so there's this style, and then there is a knurled pattern, sort of a fine knurling. Maybe I'll throw an image up on the screen. Note to self. So yeah, they're both. I think they're both real cool. I think most people would probably prefer the knurled. And I like that one a lot. It just happened that I had recently acquired a number of knives that had that sort of diamond milling pattern, so I figured I'd go for something a little different. So, where was I? Oh yes, the weight. So interestingly, this style handle weighs 4.2 ounces, while the knurled is only 4 ounces. So if you like the knurled, you also get the benefit of a slightly lower weight. Either way, 4 or 4.2 ounces is perfectly acceptable to me. Everyone, obviously has their own preferences. The blade stock is nice and thin. It's another interesting point is that you can see it's slightly thicker at the tabs for the front and rear flipping than it is once you get into the actual, part of the blade that extends beyond the handles. So the overall blade stock is 0.118 inches, but the part that actually does the cutting, once you get past the handles, I measured it just 0.11 inches. So nice and thin, very slicey. The blade grind is obviously I don't know what that would be, maybe 5/8 inch flat grind, leading up to a little bit of a flat showing, and then there's a swedge that pretty much runs the length of the knife. The finish, this is a bead blast on the primary grind and on the swedge, and then it's a horizontal machine satin on the flats. The factory edge on this knife was, to be honest, not the greatest. Came in at, I think it was, what was it? I can't remember. It was over 200 best, so not terrible, but far from the sharpest factory edge I've ever had. The factory edge angles were like 20 degrees on one side and about 24 degrees on the other side. So needless to say, I have now have put my own edge on the knife. It is now sitting at 15 degrees per side. And so you'll note that despite this being a pretty low bevel angle, it's still a pretty small bevel. So what that should tell you is that this is ground nice and thin. And in fact, it is ground nice and thin. I measured it out of the box at about 12 thousandths per inch right behind the edge. And even after putting a 15 degree bevel on it, it's still only about 13 thousandths behind the edge. So kudos to the nice thin slicey grind. Combine that with a relatively tall flat grind and a thin blade stock, and you're going to have a very nice slicer. And let's do a couple size comparisons. Why not? So that is compared to a Spyderco PM2. You can see that the caliber is a little bit longer. The edge length, cutting edge, is certainly longer. Let's also compare it to a Spyderco Sage 1. Move these up a little bit. So the Sage 1, if you're not familiar with it, this stands in for a PM3 because they're almost exactly the same length dimensions generally. It's just the blade shape that's kind of different. So compared to a PM2 and a PM3/Sage 1. And let's also throw in something else people are familiar with, which is a Benchmade bug out. So you can see a fair bit bigger than the bug out. And just to compare it to another full-size knife, this is a Demco AD20. This is the S variety with a thinner stock, and it's wearing original goat titanium scales. But so really about the same lengthwise. It's about the same length as the AD20S, although it is, when we look at it on end, you'll see that it's quite a bit thinner. I think it's just about half an inch for the caliber, and I can't remember what this is, but it's certainly not that thin. This is the caliber is about the same width as the PM2. So let's take these out of here now. Ergonomically speaking, it's a neutral handle. Obviously, it's a good size handle. So I have large glove size hands. Gripping it below the front finger choil, it's still I still get all four fingers comfortably on the handle. The finger choil is pretty good size. I can get my sausage-like index finger in there without threatening to cut myself. And yeah, so that's a good comfortable grip that way too. I do not feel any hot spots really from the clip in either position. You can do the reverse grip. Sorry. Feel the clip a bit that way, but realistically I will never hold a knife this way. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, let's talk for a minute about the pocket clip. So, you know, when you first look at this knife, you might think, is that like a spring steel or a titanium clip? Because it has sort of that style, but in fact it is a fully milled titanium pocket clip, and I think it's I really think it's beautiful. To me, it just complements the design of the knife, and in practice, it works perfectly. It's has very good tension, not too stiff, not too weak, It goes in and out of pocket super easily. That's something that you might consider if you're interested in the knurled version. I'm not sure if it has like a landing pad underneath. That's potentially something that could be of a concern. But yeah, so great pocket clip, and that to me is such a such an underappreciated aspect of a knife, often by manufacturers and designers, really. So I hate it when either a clip is, sometimes these milled clips can look fantastic and match the design nicely, but they're just so stiff, or just that they, it makes carrying the knife unpleasant. Or they can take a nice knife and just slap a spring steel clip on it and say, which might work very nicely, but it just doesn't complement the knife. So this is great. I appreciate whenever a designer puts some effort into the pocket clip. So what about the rear flipper? Rear flipper works very nicely. This jimping on here is very fine, and it's pretty aggressive. I generally advocate for this sort of jimping on flipper tabs, especially front flippers. But this one may just have gone a bit too far, or it may just be the strength of the detent, because this one does have a very sort of pretty stiff detent, which I like, but it can be a little irritating if you're, not if you just open it to use the knife, but if you're fidgeting with it over and over again, as some of us tend to do, then it can be a little abrasive. The front flipper works great too. No problems at all. You can do the sort of finger over move. I can get the top sometimes. I'm not good at that. Anyway, it's possible to do the top flip too, but that's not my forte. So yeah, the action I'm going to give, I would say an A minus, just because of the combination of the strong detent and the somewhat abrasive jimping. Obviously, the reverse flick works great. It's not, you don't have a ton of room there. The blade hole's pretty small. I find just getting a little bit of, getting the meat of the middle finger in there is the best way to open it. I can get my nail in there. It's just not as comfortable because it's a pretty small space. As far as a thumb flip, it's doable, but it's not a great thumb opener, just because the hole is so small. But you can, if you sort of grasp the clip like this, making sure you're not on the lock bar, and you kind of dig your thumb into the bottommost part of the hole, you can flip it. So that's good. So let's just leave this here for now. So I always go on longer than I want to, but here we are. I will wrap it up, and then this section, and then we're going to move to a disassembly, and I'm going to do a little hardness testing on the steel just to see where it comes in relative to the advertised spec. See you on the next side. So let's see how this thing works. As you'll see, the disassembly is easy, especially if you're using the right size Torx bit, which I was not here. That was a T10. The actual pivot is a T8, as most are. So there we go. The pivot was not Loctited, which is great. It was snug, but not over tight. Pretty easy to take out. I always like to see that. Just flip it over and throw the pivot collar away. Minor miracle that it wound up on the tray instead of on the floor, but we'll take what we can get. So as you see, there's only one other screw that you can see on this knife, and it's on the opposite side. So stood to reason that I would have to take that out, which I did, which is also another T8. That does not secure the pocket clip. It's just connecting through to the scale. So now the scale should come off pretty easily. Just sort of levering it up from the back. And it did. So what we have here is obviously the screw hole, and there's a pin that keeps it from twisting. You can see the Golden Design logo on the scale. And this is how this button frame lock works. Pretty cool. It's amazing to me that nobody has thought of this until now. It's just so simple and so brilliant. And it, as we're saying, it just works beautifully. So yeah, so it's on bearings, obviously. It has an internal stop pin which rides around in that channel. There goes one of the bearings. So I'm just seeing how this fits together here when the blade is assembled. And you can see that the that little lock bar button connection actually has a section that fits into the tang of the knife, which I would imagine that would provide some measure of additional security, because it's as long as that little piece is fitted into the tang, the blade isn't going to move, is what I was saying. So what's interesting is that the actual lock bar makes contact with the jimping on the rear flipper. So it seems to work fine. There's no blade play, and up or down, side to side, it's rock solid. So I don't know. You would think it might be less secure because you have less actual contact due to the jimping, but it seems to work fine. So we'll see how it holds up over time. Since we have the blade out, I figured might as well use this portable hardness tester, which is technically called a Leeb hardness tester, that I got pretty recently. I've been playing around with. It's not as accurate, or at least as consistent as a full-scale Rockwell tester that you would normally see, but it's what I can afford and what I have room for, so this is what I'm trying to use. I won't say the results are 100% accurate at this point, although it's looking pretty good in my testing so far. What this does is you have to measure on a flat section of the blade. You sort of cock this impact device, which kind of looks like a pen. It shoots a tungsten sort of projectile at the blade, and then it measures how high it bounces, which is an indication of the hardness. So I'm putting a little bit of grease on this metal pedestal here to provide better contact between the blade and the pedestal. You need a pretty thick chunk of steel in order for this device to work accurately, and so you want to have the best possible contact you can have between the blade, which is relatively thin, and the calibration pedestal here, which is quite heavy. It weighs about 6 pounds, I think. So I'm just wiping off any oil on the tang of the blade. Looks good. So now I'm going to sort of stick it on this grease. It's just a thin coating. It also helps just keep the blade in place while I'm doing the test. Although it will slide around a little, I don't think that actually impacts the accuracy of the test. Turning it on, you can see it's set to HRC. I have this set to do an average of 3 readings. So here we go. Maybe I might turn the sound up for one of these so you can hear this sort of bouncing. There's 1. gives me a reading of 61.4. I'm just moving it very slightly to do the second test. And I got 61. So far, pretty consistent. Move it over a little bit more. Cock it. And 61.3. So now it's going to average it out to 61.3. I previously had checked the calibration on the pedestal itself, and I was finding that I was getting my readings were about 0.2 HRC low. So we'll call this a 61.5 HRC reading. The device has a margin of error of plus or minus 0.5 HRC. So technically this could be anywhere from 61 to 62. I believe Golden Designs says that their target hardness for this MagnaCut blade is 61 to 63. So it's right in their target range, and that's good to go. Personally, I would like to see it up around 64, but it's 61 and a half to 62 is good. You're going to get good edge retention, good toughness, and excellent corrosion resistance, which are all the great hallmarks of MagnaCut, being the king of balanced steels. So yeah, I'm happy enough with that reading. And again, I'm not saying that this is a certified hardness test. This is just the best that I can do with the equipment that I have. Eventually, I'm going to send a few blades out for official testing, and then I'll compare it to what I'm getting with this equipment, and I'll have a better idea how accurate it really is. But, thought you might be interested. Okay, so now it's time to put this thing back together. I figured since I have it apart, I might as well, and I have a bunch of skiff bearings, I might as well put in some skiff bearings, even though it was working fine before. It is what it is. We'll see what difference, if any, it makes. As you saw, I think it was a 5mm pivot. I'm using this little test. It's a metal card that sold by Skiff, and so we had a 5mm pivot and 3/64 inch bearings. I happen to have some of those, so let's put them in and see what happens. Hardest part of this was getting this stupid baggie open. I could have cut it, but I like to put the old bearings back in the same bag and just mark them with whichever knife they are, in case I decide to put the factory bearings in or sell the knife and want to include the factory bearings. Hasn't happened yet, but you never know. Okay, got the bag open. You can see the difference. Basically, the skiff bearings have more balls, so that's the main difference. Theoretically, that should give you better blade stability just because there are more points of contact with the washers and the scales. It's also, unlike the stamp bearings, the skiff bearings are solid phosphor bronze, I think, ring. They don't have an open end like the most factory bearings do. So I'm just going to take a little rubbing alcohol, just clean. This was very clean and actually had been lubricated before. I assume that Mr. Golden had done that himself when he did the IQ testing on this, which is really nice to see. So this is really not necessary. The knife is practically new, but you might as well, since you got it open. There was a little bit of grease or gunk on the actual pivot itself. Just checking to see the pivot is D-shaped, so it is a captive pivot. I was just checking to see where the flat section is on the scale so that I can orient the pivot correctly. It's for reference, the flat section points down towards the pocket clip. I don't know what I'm doing now. I'm just trying to find out where the actual D is on the frame, and it's on the clip side, the lock side of the scale. This never makes sense to me. If you're, obviously you want to have a D-shaped pivot, but why wouldn't you put the D cutout on the side that the pivot pushes into, so you don't have to worry about aligning the other scale? So there's one area for improvement. It's not just Golden Design Works that does this. I find this with a lot of manufacturers. Seems illogical to me. So I'm going to do a little light. You can't really see. I'm really just putting one drop on, and then I'm spreading it around with the tip of the applicator. Putting the bearing in, spinning it around a little bit, putting a drop on the detent ball path, and then sort of spreading that around a little bit also with the tip of the applicator. And we'll put the scale back in place. And here's where we have the issue with the alignment of the D-shaped pivot. So even though I had tried to align it the best I could in advance, it's just a little bit off, I think. So I'm going to have to remove the scale, try to turn that just a little bit so it'll fit in the D slot on the lock side scale. I believe I end up, using a little pair of tweezers just to rotate this around a little bit. Maybe turn the tweezers over. Yeah, good idea. So that should do it. And that snaps into place. Oh, I see the pivot's sort of poked out a little bit on the other side. Always got to be careful of that. Sometimes if you just move the blade a little bit, that'll pop in, which is what happens here. There we go. Now everything is flush, and we can put the screws back in. So we'll get the pivot collar and the pivot screw. One thing I found with this knife is that you can screw the pivot screw down all the way and sort of snug it up, and that leaves an excellent action. So you'll find with a lot of knives, when you take them apart and read or just adjust them, that you have to sort of hit a specific tightness on the pivot screw to get the action you want. I generally, there's pluses and minuses to that. On the one hand, you can sort of fine tune it, but on the other hand, if the pivot screw doesn't stay right in that spot, then you're out of luck. You're going to lose your centering. You're going to get blade play. With the caliber, you just tighten it right down like a Chris Reeves, and you get great fall shut action. So now this is a 2-screw disassembly. It really couldn't be any easier, except for the D-shaped pivot. So here I am just tightening that all the way down. See if that works. And it works great. I mean, it's just fall shut. I'm actually getting more fall shut action with the skiff bearings than I had with the factory bearings. You know, with the factory bearings, it was dropping, but it was tending to sort of stop down, you know, close to the closed position, or it just wasn't quite as drop shut. That may be because the pivot screw was over tightened. I didn't check it beforehand, so I can't say for sure if that's a difference between the bearings or it's just a difference in the tightness of the pivot screw. I could put the bearings in, the factory bearings in, and check that, but I'm not going to, because it works great with the skiff bearings, and I'm just going to ride with that. So yeah, super smooth action now. Really feels great. And that is all there was to the disassembly. Like I said, could not be easier. 2 screws, comes right apart, goes right back together, centered up beautifully, no blade play, good to go. Okay, I'm back over here on the tabletop. So I just wanted to say thanks for stopping by. If you enjoyed the content, please sign up. Please subscribe. Please like the video if you liked it. And I'll try to get back soon with the next one. Take care now.